So our presenter today is Alistair Baillie. So Alistair has over 20 years of business management experience. He's worked in consulting, project management, and sales all over the world. Currently, he is co-founder and CEO of ShipShape, which is a Cardiff-based company which uses big data to help new businesses find suitable investors. I believe he's going to tell us more about that today. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Alistair now. And
okay,
I just want to mention,
I'll
just mention as well, if you want to ask questions, you can enter the question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute to ask the question. Sorry, Alistair.
No worries. Okay. Well, thanks all. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not natively a Cardiff boy. I'm more Aussie than anything else. But ShipShape is a Cardiff company, and we are working remotely at the moment. But we are going to be based in the Cardiff Business and Technology Centre, which I believe is actually quite close to where you guys all are. So sorry, one moment. I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about what we do at ShipShape, and also just some of the context behind it. The reason for talking to you all, and the reason why money come in, there's a lot of people want to work in startups, and we help founders find venture capital investors is what we do as a business, and we help people find money for their startup. But why do you want to work in a startup? It's normally because you want to be rich. Let's face it, you're leaving a data science academy, you want to come and go and do something amazing. This guy Zuckerberg, what the bloody hell did he know? Anyway, what's a knowledge graph? That's so passe. I can do so much better than that. I want to be rich and famous and load it and do something amazing. Or you want to be just something that you do some social good for the world. There's me being old and cynical there, but I want to start up my business and I want to do something fantastic for the planet. So there are ways of doing this, one of which is you can join major government organizations, and one, you can go and do join sort of major organizations such as IBM, which are still these days one of the largest data businesses in the world, or you can kind of start up on your own journey. We support startups, and I'm going to tell you about a little bit about being a startup and how you actually take it through. So when people are talking about startups, there are two basic types of startup. You're either a product startup or you're a service startup. If you're a product startup, you're trying to sell an idea. You're trying to sell something that people can access. And the most important difference between the two is a product startup sells something that's not directly linked to your labor. If you leave the Data Science Academy and you go work for a consulting business, this is a service business. And even if you do it yourself, you start up yourself, you're still actually working, and everything is driven by labor or derivations of labor. So old cynical people like me would meet with other old cynical people like me, and they talk about service and consulting business as selling humans. And it is literally that simple. It is body shopping, selling humans. You're selling your labor. So everybody wants to work in the cool side, which is the product bit, which is doing something, and you're separated away. You've differentiated your labor from the actual product that's produced. The great advantage of this commercially is you can do something that's scalable. So you can do something that actually makes significantly more money than you can actually just producing your labor. The disadvantage, though, is you need actually money to get to the stage. You need to have a minimum viable product. MVP is the terminology that people use, so that you can actually sell this out online. And for that, you need capital. So yeah, there are different types of startup, and there's a more of a services-based startup and how you make money, and there's more of a product-based startup. And this kind of shows the difference between the two. So just going back to the services one again, because I will. This is automatically scrolling. Thank you very much. You make money from a services company by increasing the number of staff whose services that you can sell and making a profit margin on top of them. There are problems with this. To start with, if you're kind of coming in and you've got one staff, just yourself, then two, then 3, 5, 6, 10, why does staff number 11 choose to join you? Because at the end of the day, you're usually not offering very much to them. They're able to go out and sell their own time anyway, so why would they give you their profit margin? If you're one of the early number of employees, it's because you're sharing in training, you're sharing in knowledge, there's a sense of camaraderie. So as you leave the Data Science Academy and you go out somewhere, joining a small consultancy is a really fun way to start off life. You learn a lot. You get exposed to a lot of businesses, and there's a great sense of camaraderie in working in them. Joining a large consultancy, though, you kind of meet the grinder. So it depends on your choices. But coming back to what a product startup does, this is a classic graph, which is actually done by two guys called Asawa and Miyazaki in 2006, and it's been quoted many, many, many times since. I'm really sorry this is scrolling, and I wish I knew how to make this fix, but I don't. So you start off by building things, and this big white line at the bottom shows how much money it's costing you, because you haven't sold anything yet. You're building a tech product, but you haven't actually gone and made any money yet. And the problem is, the more that you build, the more you actually need money, because the more you discover, the more professional you have to be. And when you're coming up to actually commercialize stuff, you really do start to need quite a lot of money, because you've got to present a professional product, but you're not selling anything yet. And it's only when you actually afterwards, when you've started to, and the phrase is to commercialize, and you actually got something out there in the world, that actually you can make some money. But these are very, very typical things. You start off by researching your product. You start off by developing it. There's not too many of you. You'll have a small enough team. Then you end up in the valley of death, which is what this is called, which is when you actually need more people because you're getting ready to commercialize, but you're still not making enough money. And then you actually come up, and eventually you're a profitable business and everybody loves you. Some of these stages, I'm going to talk about the product, take longer than others. So if you're building out a technology project until it can be sold, it takes some time, and so it can be quite expensive. So you need investment funding until you can get there. For capital goods, the payback period is usually longer, and it's even more expensive. But then you start thinking about ahead, some things get very long and very expensive. So if you just entered the project to do the world's first commercial nuclear fusion reactor, which I can show you here. I was fascinated by this last year. I was a physics graduate myself. This is all about the nuclear fusion reactor they're building in Idaho, and it's going to be amazing. And it'll be a 23-year period between that actually the project starting and something coming online. So if you're into, kind of some of these major, more physically intensive things, there is a long time to go in between actually starting off and actually getting anything to happen. So you need funding on the way. Most funding is actually people talking about startups. Not only are they talking about product companies rather than service companies, they're typically talking about tech stuff. This is what people want to do. And partly it's because of the timing, because most tech companies, you can kind of go from your idea to having something commercializable within a year or two. And this is something that somebody funding you can get interested in. Whereas the funding you for 23 years, only a government is going to do that. And you go through these terms. And if you're going to leave DSA and get involved in the startup world, you need to get to know what these terms are. There's an initiation phase, but then you will go through an angel phase. This is where they are called angel investors. Basically, it's knowing a rich person. If you want to start a company, there is almost only one way to do this in the world, which is know a rich person. And they fund you up until you get into your seed investment. Your seed investment is where you with the money from the rich person, you've created something that is a product. People can see it, but it's still not quite robust. It falls over. There's some backends, there's some CSV files when there should be a database in the back end, and it's a bit ropey, but you've got something out there. And then you want some seed funding that takes you out into the big bad world. That's it. The last thing you really want, though, is the Series A, and this is where it's the biggest raise and sometimes of the lot, and it's called a Series A because it's after your C, but it's the first of it and hopefully the last of your series, where your costs are highest, because just before you fully commercialize, you need to have all of the IT security, permissions, everything to make it reliable. You can't just have a random instance on WordPress. You have a fully fledged set of AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud instances working. You have all the licenses for your equipment working. You have all your QA, your reliability engineers working with you. That's a lot of money, but you haven't started selling anything yet. So this is typically the biggest amount of money you'll need to raise. After that, you do need some go-to-market funding, because don't forget the advertising. There's no point in having the best products in the world if nobody knows about you, but you're still not making any money. And often there's a one last kick, because I'm nearly there, but we're not quite profitable yet. And then after you've finished making all this money, you're out there in the big wide world. So if you leave the Data Science Academy and you start off at this patch here and you want to be the next Zuckerberg, this journey here, everybody talks about having the magic 3-year journey that gets you from starting off your company to this big point of success. It's actually 10, but everybody wants it to be 3 years, but it's 10 years, but it can be a very exciting journey. You can also hear other things in the world that talk about other things, Series B, Series C, Series D. And if you follow news about companies like Revolut or things like that, they will be talking about doing their Series B, Series D, Series D. This is typically for larger retail-facing companies where you're mostly paying for advertising. It's someone who is, the fintechs are a good example of this. There's a Monzo Bank, there's a Revolut Bank, there's a Starling Bank, and they simply need money to pay for a lot of advertising to replace incumbent banks. And people will stump up large amounts of money at that point in time. From a sort of data science perspective, they're kind of boring though, because it's just about the product's already out there, it's done. This is a particular type of business where they are looking just for more money, so to go out and take on large players. But from a data science perspective, it's not actually very interesting at that point in time. They've turned into large organizations themselves. So where do you get this money? And hopefully you can see that on the screen. The initial phrase you'll hear talked about is bootstrapping. Bootstrapping means to self-fund it, or you have this thing called sweat for equity, which is basically where you don't get paid. So you're going to take a percentage, you're going to form a company together, you can leave Data Science Academy, form a company, and say, I am the chief something officer of my amazing company I've just formed, leaving Cardiff University, and my salary is 0 because I haven't got any money yet. And this is called bootstrapping. You'll go through an initiation phase, and as I said, there are some options around here now, and it's actually really quite good. The UK government and Welsh government both actually offer quite reasonable funding to get ideas off the ground. There are a lot of these programs, and if you're looking at what you're going to do as you finish your MSc and heading out into the world, do check out Smart Cymru, check out the Development Bank of Wales, check out Business Wales, check out Innovate UK. There are programs and programs out there you can go to get some initial funding to get an idea off the ground. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens, and I worked in companies that did this, is just debt, but you mortgage your house. And some people have done this. So if you're in the position where maybe you're an MSc student who's a bit older and you might have a house, you can mortgage your house. And I worked for companies that did that successfully. The company then sold eventually and the owners made a big profit. It was quite risky because obviously most startups fail and you would lose your house. The important thing why these angel peoples are called angels, because they take businesses through, is because by the time you need this amount of money, you can't fund that yourself, even if you mortgaged your house. But also you're too small for a VC company, a venture capital company to have any interest in you. Venture capital companies will only talk to you when you're making around about £500,000 or preferably even £1 million a year. Before that, they're not interested in you. So you need people to carry you forward from, I need to pay myself, I need to pay, the rest of the team needs to pay ourselves, but we're too small yet. And we need to find rich people. And they will do this in the form of equity, or there's a thing called a convertible note. If anybody's interested, they can ping me on this, which is how you actually, it's a way of getting money for against a future valuation of the company. But one of the important things is for both angel and seed is there's no debt financing for the company. If you want to grow a traditional business and you are a major company, you can go to the financial markets and get debt. You can raise bonds on the open market, or you can go to your bank and actually just get working capital. Nobody's going to lend you any money here because there's no track record against it for the company. But also, and the company is now too big that you can lend by personal debt. So you have to go out and getting people who believe in the dream and are going to give you some money and take a equity stake in the company. By the time you get up to your Series A, debt is actually a possibility. And by the time you get up to your go-to-market funding, you can actually have things like traditional bank financing does actually work on there. You're starting to turn into a bigger company. But those are, essentially the life cycle stages of a startup. I think one of the things, I don't know, I can't see the audience is one of the problems when you're presenting online rather than anything else. And maybe you're all just eating your lunch by this stage and going, I wanted him to talk about, more technical data sciencey stuff. Don't worry, we've got a guy called Gareth online. He works with us as well. And he is our senior data scientist if you want to ask some questions on that. But I thought maybe one of the things you want to know is how to make money. I can't overemphasize enough that the major way of making money, if you want to leave university, you want to leave and go and start money, is you have to know a rich person. Now, there are two ways of knowing a rich person, or three ways actually. One, be born rich. So if you are, fantastic. My name's Alistair. I'll give you my number. I need some money, so come and talk to me. That's fantastic, like rich people. The second thing is to know in your personal social groups and rich people. But again, we're talking about a disappearingly small proportion of society. So maybe there is one of you on this call who qualifies in either of those first two groups, but most of you aren't, just by law of numbers. What you do is network. And if you want to make money leaving the Data Science Academy and going out and starting a company, I cannot overemphasize the point enough that you have to go out and network. And you have to do it in a way that's valuable. And by valuable, I mean not greasy. Everybody hates the dude who's turning up and just pitching their latest idea. They're obviously out for money. They're trying to get people to give them. It's greasy, it's horrible, it looks horrible, and it's also unsuccessful because nobody wants to work with you. To network successfully, you need to go into every one of all meetings, like the Pi Data Cardiff meetup. I know that exists. There's an AI Cardiff meetup, all these things. You have to turn up and you have to offer something of value. You have to have something valuable that people want to listen to. You have to have done your research. You have to have a topic. You have to be of interest. Then people want to talk to you and they remember you. You also have to be someone that people want to work with. There are a few famous people who are just horrible, like Steve Jobs was famously horrible to work for. He's probably a very nice guy, but to work for, he was absolutely just tyrannical and awful. They are the exception, not the rule. The rule by far. The biggest single rule is that you have something to offer, that people want to work with you. And this includes your investors, because they want to believe in this dream. They want to believe that you can attract people to work with you. They typically want to see a team. So you have networked, you formed together and said, three of us from Data Science Academy have got an idea together, and maybe one from another university as well. We want to go together. This appeals to people who want to fund ideas that are spinning out from universities. They want to know that you are someone that people want to work with. Being some kind of like just strange person in the corner having the best data science idea, they'll be like, it's lovely, but it's never going to fly. They want to know that you can deal with people. I can give you a direct example from another industry like this. Long ago, I used to do some acting work badly, which is why you don't recognize me from any of the films I was in, because they never went anywhere. But I went to one of the best acting schools in Australia, and some of the people there were busy learning their lines. They were busy technically doing everything to be the best actor in the world, and none of them went anywhere. The people that got the jobs coming out of acting, are the people that bothered to go to the pub with all the other people, and they made sure that they did it naturally, just to be part of the crew. So when there was work that came up, because there's not much work in acting, but when some did come up and somebody had to make a call to someone to find someone to be in that ad, they got the call because they had networked their way through. And it is the same in everything, the same in data science as well. So again, I can't overemphasize that enough. You have to have an idea. Yes, you have to be passionate about your idea. You have to be able to sell that idea. But you have to sell that idea by not selling. You have to sell that idea just by being someone that people want to talk to, and then they receive your idea. You meet a rich person. The rich person backs your idea, and there you go. That's the most important parts of the talk, I reckon. I can't actually see if there are any questions coming up here or not, so I'm going to pause for a moment.
Alistair, I was going to ask, what's the sort of cost of all of this funding? Because if someone's going to back your company, they're obviously going to want something from it in return. They're not just going to, unless it might be a government grant or something. But a lot of individual investors, I suspect, or corporate investors, they're going to want something back in return, aren't they? So what's the sort of cost of that, and how long would that last for, and when would you start seeing your profit as being your profit rather than having to give a percentage to someone else?
Okay, so normally for most startups, they're not expecting to get any distributions from their equity. So let me take that step. Most people investing in you will want equity in your company, They won't actually expect any cash flow given to you over any lifetime of the company until there is the thing called the exit, which is where you sell the company to someone else. Most investors, particularly in things that relate to data science, are buying into an idea and they want the company to run for 4 or 5 years and get bought by a bigger company. And then they receive some of the profit for that. They don't typically expect any of the profit, the companies have a profit at all, in fact, in that period of time, and to get any money from it. So what you're talking about is giving away equity. And one of the problems is then how much equity do they get? And in order to do this, you have to value the idea, which is one of the great black arts of venture capital things. There are some basic rules which go around at the moment. You have to make up what you think is the ongoing revenue you can make at the end of usually year 2, and then you multiply that by 10, and you say that's the valuation of my company. And you will try to put it up by saying, we're going to make more and more, but you always multiply the revenues by 10 and say that's the valuation. Then the angel investor will take a percentage stake on that basis. Now, following that methodology, lots of startups have achieved valuations fairly early on of having valuations of £1 million, £2 million, £3 million, which makes you feel awesome as the founder, because on theory you have this paper that you've just created where there's millions of pounds that's yours. Don't get forward, in practice that doesn't exist, and it dilutes over time, because every time you raise money, someone takes another share of your company. But the angels will come in, and typically most angels will agree for a good idea around data science. They're comfortable backing a dream that someone says is worth kind of between 1 and 2 million. They're not comfortable backing a dream where someone says my company's worth 10 or 20 million. They'll go, you're just laughing, you haven't created anything yet. And in order for that million to be created, you have to have coded something. There has to be some real thing to show them. You can go to things called like accelerators or incubators, and we've got some definitions of this on the Jargon Dictionary on our website. But they will offer you more, because they will maybe give you office space, they will give you access to their own network, and sometimes they give you some own money. But they ask for a lot more equity, so they might give you, say, £100,000 as like a start to get your company moving, but want 20-30% of the company for doing so. So they're really taking quite large stakes. So it depends. You have to judge whether that network that they are offering as part of being part of an incubator is worth it or not. So it's kind of a long answer, but does that answer the question?
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Alistair. And thank you for the presentation as well. That's great. So I suppose a question for maybe Gareth then, if he's be your sort of, did you say CTO? Have you got sort of I don't know, like AI in the background, sort of working away on things to help sort of grow your business and look for startups or to help them or sort of companies who are looking for investment?
Hi,
Gareth, is your audio working?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
Brilliant, amazing. Yeah, hi, I'm the senior data scientist in ShipShape. So yeah, we've got essentially what we have is a backend that is essentially how it's working is that we have a lot of stuff that investors are publishing, be that blog posts, articles, text from investor websites, just lots of different pieces of text. We're converting. We're able to semantically sort of link keywords that people enter in our clients enter in the front end. So people that are after a specific type of investor will type in keywords. So say renewable energy, they can type in renewable energy, solar, maybe solar panels, possibly their startup is in solar energy. So they can type that in, and we're able to sort of semantically link what they type in with what different investors have published, and we can kind of score what how their we score the different investors and present back the best matches for them. So I guess a good way of looking at it is a sort of dating agency for investors. But yeah, essentially it's that's kind of what we're doing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
I've got a quick question. So you're in the process of establishing an office in Cardiff at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that, about your presence in Cardiff?
So the yes, let's say quite a bit. So one, Wales is a very good. South Wales is an excellent place to start up a business. The big bright lights of London are pretty smelly and dirty when you actually get here, and the support from state, the support from local agencies isn't actually as good as you get from Cardiff at all. So Cardiff does have things for support, direct financial support for businesses to come in and actually start up. It has things like rental accommodation. So Cardiff Business and Technology Centre, you can go to, if you pitch your case well enough to Cardiff City, they will actually help out with some of the rental because they want to actually be generating jobs in the area. Whereas you come across to other places, people in London don't care about that. That's never going to happen. There's also a great strip and centre that includes Swansea as well, of skill sets that we can actually get and work with. So if you want to start up and have a business and you're going to be in North Wales, I think it's going to be a bit more of a struggle. Whereas in and around the Cardiff region, it's a lovely balance of there's enough people to work with, but also it's a small enough startup cluster that the state and government is very supportive of coming there. So it's a really good place to go and do business. And even if you just jump across the Severn and you go to Bristol, which you could argue many of those things apply to, it's actually not as encouraging a business environment. There are these organisations, the Development Bank of Wales, there is Business Wales, there's FinTech Wales, and they're very, very good at promoting Welsh businesses, and it's very helpful. If that's, and also just why also Cardiff's quite nice to live in, which is also quite, I'm actually speaking to you from smelly East London. It's bloody horrible. So as soon as COVID's lifted, we've got the office space, and as soon as COVID's lifted, I get to come and take my family to somewhere much more pleasant.
Yeah, I believe your office space is going to be quite close to the new computer science and maths building. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if you know the Woodville pub.
Yeah, I think I do know.
I expect most of the students do.
Yeah, I've been told by Gareth. Gareth told me that most of the students will know the Woodville pub. It's near the Woodville pub.
Yeah, you can literally see it from the window.
Yeah. I could tell you another reference point, but I think that's the most accurate one I can give you. Yes.
Yeah, it's CBTC, so it's you might know it. It's sort of, yeah, it's literally next door to the Woody. So
fair enough. Sounds good. We'll look forward to welcoming you in Cardiff then.
Yeah, please do. Well, Gareth's already there, by the way. Gareth's a local.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
At least I'm much closer than Sydney, which is where I started. So I am, I'm progressively coming towards the lights, but I'm afraid I stopped in London on the way, so I'm nearly there.
Andreas has got a question in the chat. Do you help ideas that are going to serve their products in other countries, at least in the start?
Initially, no. We are focused on the UK. The products may be able to go to other countries, but we companies in the UK are the people that we start with, and investors in the UK. Those UK investors and UK companies may well be planning on selling their products in another country, but we as a company ourselves are focused on supporting, providing a service that supports UK startups. And I've said, and our first region, the region we're focusing on, is South Wales within that. So we're not even marketing ourselves very much in, say, Newcastle or Manchester. South Wales is our first focus.
Okay, cool.
If you have an idea, how would you recommend getting started? Thanks, Charlie. I think I'm going to slightly riff back to what I said earlier, but you have to, and maybe I can actually point to things. You have to get a pitch deck together, and there are fairly common things about pitch decks, which are written. So so that's my 1-year-old daughter just having a moment in the background. You get a pitch deck together and you start taking that out. But in terms of find out your niche, if you're leaving the data science, go to things like the PyData markup and start finding the areas where people that are going to invest in your area are going to meet. And as I said, you go back and network to them, but you have to have a pitch deck, you have to have a calling card, and they will want your elevator pitch, get that practiced. So what is the one sentence? Everybody hates it because they have this big idea and they want to do so much. It's like you have to get your idea down to a one sentence, and you have to be able to give somebody a 10-page deck about what your idea is, and then you just go out and talk until you have found the backing that you need. How to judge whether a project can make interest? The next question. It's kind of similar the other way around. You do have to work through a financial model and be honest, be brutally honest with how much money something can make, and also brutally honest about how much it costs. And talk to people. If you're coming out of the Data Science Academy, you know a lot of the theory, but you probably don't know as much about practice, about how much it actually takes to run these things for computers, data security, infrastructure. So go and find someone, go and talk to someone, and just find a network. Who's going to know how to set things up on AWS, Azure Cloud? Who do I know who can do my DevOps? If you don't know what DevOps is, look it up, find out. And you have to put all those costs into a financial model, and be brutally honest with yourself about how much this can make. And there are some magic acronyms: TAM, SAM, and SOM. So the total addressable market, the serviceable addressable market, and the service obtainable market. So it's how many people are in the world that are interested in my type of stuff, but how many of them are really doing my type of stuff, and how many of them can I get? And you have to be brutally honest about that and actually model that in, going, which customer segments am I actually going to be getting hold of, and can I realistically win in? Just having, I'm going to get a great idea and I'm going to get 1% of the advertising revenue that Facebook does. It's like, well, why? Based on what? So you have to be brutally honest in a financial model. In the process, how important with using data? I'm afraid, sorry, Zoe, I'm not quite sure what that question. In the process, how important with using data? I'm not quite sure what that means, sorry.
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I mean, maybe if you want to judge whether the project is good, do you depend on your feelings or markets or just the data analysis?
You should always end with the data analysis. So you have to bring yourself, because investors coming into you will ask you to have built out a data picture. It might be based on subjective analysis, but you have to flesh it out into something that is pure data. And secondly, you need to go through the process of convincing yourself, I've got this feeling, but map out. For our own business, there were some things that I really thought might be the great money spinners for our own business, and I went and mapped it out. I modeled it out myself. Just nothing that requires a data science degree. Just simple data modeling of how many customers, where are they, what's the cost of getting them, what can I do? And I realized there were some things that just weren't going to make us very much money, and you have to turn those feelings into something quantitative.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, do you have an Charlie? No, you don't need an alpha version of a product for going for funding, but if I come back here, it makes a difference. Your first funding can be based off a pitch deck. It's just an idea, but it will be small. But if I come back down to here, the sources where you can get this kind of money, as I said, knowing rich people still counts quite a lot. So your friends and family, if you happen to know some people who will back just your idea, then you can get some investment from them. But the government is actually a place, all these things like Business Wales, Smart Cymru, Smart Grants, Innovate UK, Development Bank of Wales, they are people that can back just ideas. So, but you have to be very, very good at describing your idea. And even if you haven't cut any code in it yet, you do need to have might need some basic UX you've done yourself. So go and get a free version of Balsamic and just kind of, or even just PowerPoint, and just start getting something together, describing the idea very well. So you need to have a very, very good description about what you're going to be doing. But you can get this, particularly some of the government funding stuff can be got initially before you have an alpha version of the product. By the time you're coming out into getting into angels and actually you're needing into this next stage, this is where you do need an alpha version of the product before you can go and convince people to give you, you know, £1 million. An angel round is typically going to be about £1 million, up to £1 million, between £500,000 and £1 million, and you need an alpha version before you go for that, usually. Anything else? I guess one more comment. Actually, Gareth and I were just talking about, I'll blame him as well. So I talked about networking and having your idea, get your pitch deck, get your financial model. Also, be ruthless and brutal with your own skills as well. We found quite a lot of people come out of data science that have really brilliant ideas, but there's a varying level of skill on actual infrastructure setup, networking, etc., because it's not something you might necessarily have covered at university or in your masters. If that's the case, just be, you know, that's fine. But be honest about who you need to partner with. If you've already built a product that does not require that much capital, can you skip the angel step? Yes, you can. If it doesn't require that much capital at all, then you might be able to consider just if the company can cover the investments. Yeah, the best thing to do is get no investment at all. And the other piece of advice to startup is work out how much you can survive without any investment. You know, can you just eat baked beans for a year? And avoid investment altogether. So most investors come with some conditions. To start with, they just want to take a lot of your company and own a lot of it. So when you exit, they make the money, not you. But also they tend to, you know, the more you have, the more they interfere, and they have some special conditions. I'll invest in you if you promise to set up an office in Glasgow, and suddenly, you know, you have to have something in Glasgow, and then this repeats, and there's lots of conditions that get placed on your company. So the more you can avoid things, the better. How do you decide who's the best people to do a startup with? Would you marry them? Because you are going to be trusting your financial future, and you're going to be spending more time with these people than you would with any husband or wife you might have in the future. So you have to totally and utterly trust them. They'll be making decisions. You don't have time to go and check each other up. They'll be making decisions, talking to people, saying things on your behalf that affect your financial future. So that's number one. Doesn't matter how skilled they are. Beyond that, then do you have complementary sets of skills? If I come back to sort of the bootstrapping in the initiation phase, you're mostly talking about sweating for equity, not paying yourself very much, not being able to take any salary at all. So certainly when my co-founder Daniel and I started our company, we didn't take a salary for ages. So you do need to you do need to make sure you have enough skills across the board to support the company while you're doing that. So yeah, would you marry them? And then do you have a complementary set of skills to actually get you moving before you can actually afford to pay anybody?
So I want to just make a comment that ShipShape have submitted a number of MSc dissertation projects. So if you're an MSc student and you're interested in working with Alistair and his colleagues as part of your summer dissertation project, please keep an eye on the projects we'd be advertising, which Alistair and his colleagues have proposed.
Yes, certainly. We'd really love working with Data Science Academy, and particularly the, you know, I need to be shown the way around the woody. So because Gareth knows, but I don't. But also, we are a data science centric company. I mean, natural language processing is actually the core of what we do. So there is some quantitative analysis in what we do as well, but really, really, really what we're about as a company is natural language processing. There's data sourcing, there's data extraction, there's the priming of the pump, as it were, so that all the data wrangling that needs to be done. But the projects we put up, I've actually got them on the web. They're up on the website as well. But it's we had 3 projects that we put up about how we take unstructured textual data and turn it into a result that's needed by the company and needed by the world. One thing I would say as well, so we would encourage people who have some Python skills, which would help.
So is there a link to that,
Thomas,
Alistair? Can you put a link to that? You said it was on your web page.
I can actually put it on my web page. It's not.
Okay.
This is actually just on a Google Drive. This is actually what I put into your application forms. But I can put this on our web page as well. Actually, yeah. If you want, I can give you a non-navigable link.
That's fine. We'll advertise it to the students ourselves. I just thought you said you had it on the website already, but no, that's fine.
Oh, sorry, no, I just have it up here.
Okay.
I can put it up. It's fine. I'll send you a link, Patrick. I'll make it non-navigable. I'll send you this as well, and also just people can come and just see the site and my ugly mug. Thomas, if you don't yet have an idea for a company but are interested in Kieran Deas, how would you recommend starting? A few answers there. One thing we've been talking about startups here. I can actually say something completely the other way around, which is the largest companies that you go to, or even some government agencies like ONS, but IBM, these companies, they do have amazing training schemes. And one thing you will find as you leave your masters is you're brilliant at certain bits, but there's a lack of roundedness because you've been focusing on an area for your masters, and actually going into some of these larger organizations. And it's a bit boring for like a year or two, but it's still brilliant to work for IBM. IBM has the most brutal training program where they just take you to everything you need to know, and you leave work from IBM and then you can go to your startup, or you can go to another company. So look for the best training program and the most rounded training program. And particularly in terms of how you can implement things, because I have to say, we've had a lot of applications when we were starting our company from data scientists coming in who knew a lot of the theory, but they couldn't actually code anything and code themselves. And if you're going to particularly work for a small company, you have to be able to do that. You have to know the boring quotes unquotes technical implementation. And actually, I'll promise you, if you do enough of it, you find it's not quite as boring as you thought it was. There is a lot to be known just about tech skills. So recommendations are, if you want to get yourself well prepped, find the best for the best. Find the place, not necessarily with the best money, but the best grad training program, because that will lead to the most interesting career and the best money a few years down the track.